Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central. And here's your host, Bob Hickey.
And welcome to another fantastic episode of Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host, and I am so pleased to bring you information about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. My guest today is not here with us in studio. We are going to be joined live via Skype from parts unknown. Actually, I am pleased to be joined by my guest, David Gumpert. Mr. Gumpert, how are you doing today, sir?
Great. Very, very glad to be here.
I am glad to hear that. So, in the news recently in Foxborough, and folks watching at home will surely recall Lawton's Farm up on North Street here in Foxborough had an issue with the Board of Health, and the Board of Health was looking to, and you can jump in anytime you want, Mr. Gumpert, because I always defer to the expert on these things, but the Board of Health had a hearing where they were deciding whether or not to more strenuously create and enforce regulations regarding the sale of quote-unquote raw milk. And that proposal fell to defeat 2-1, and they also voted recently to formally permit the sale of raw milk in the town of Foxborough. And I'm not really sure what the significance of that is per se, but overall it was I looked at it as an opportunity for people to be heard, and it was resounding. There were an estimated 250 folks who showed up for the public hearing. In fact, the original public hearing had to be postponed until they had a room large enough to accommodate the crowd. So, and Mr. Gumpert, I believe you were there, were you not?
I was.
Excellent.
I was there.
So, at this point, I'm going to slide over, and let me just give a few credentials. I'm gonna pump your tires here, to quote everybody's favorite hockey goalie, Roberto Luongo. Mr. Gumpert, who can be accessed on the web at www.davidgumpert.com. He is an acclaimed author, and I would consider an expert on the industry of raw milk. And before I start, am I calling it correctly? Is it really called raw milk? Is that what we're calling the product?
Yeah, that's the kind of general term applied to it. It's milk that hasn't been pasteurized or homogenized or otherwise treated in any. So it's milk straight from the cow.
Milk straight from the cow. So the and those of us who spend time on farms.
Yeah, I mean,
it
might help just in explaining this to kind of do the 20,000-foot view. We have 50 states, and basically we have 50 different sets of regulations, laws governing the distribution, production of raw milk. We historically, raw milk presented some problems in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it presented problems because it was being produced in the big cities of the Northeast and the Midwest, as these cities were settled for the as part of the Industrial Revolution. You had farmers, business people moving cows into the cities, and you really had your first feedlots in places like Brooklyn and Chicago and Boston, and these feedlots for producing milk were not run well, and you had a situation where sanitation was not well. The importance of sanitation wasn't well understood, and all kinds of outbreaks of disease from milk, in part, also from bad water, other foods that got contaminated because people just didn't understand the mechanisms of disease and the importance of refrigeration and sanitation. So and these outbreaks were terrible. I mean, you had hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people getting sick, and you'd have many children dying, and adults, but mostly children dying as a result of these outbreaks. And so pasteurization came along in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and that was really became the solution to this problem. And in the minds of public health people, it still is the solution. And I mean, I think that it certainly is it's worked in the sense of reducing illness. But the fact of the matter is that the problems of the late 1800s, early 1900s are not the problems of today. So raw milk is seen by many people as more nutritious than pasteurized milk. Pasteurization is a heating process. It kills pathogens, but it also kills so-called good bacteria, right. And it inactivates enzymes and proteins that are thought to be beneficial for health and for building immunity. So so what you see today is more and more people interested in raw milk and as an unprocessed food. It really was our first processed food. Kind of getting back to the whole regulation situation, you have, as I said, you have 50 states, 50 different sets of laws, regulations. In about 10 states, raw milk is sold actually via retail. And these states include California, Maine, Connecticut. You can go into some supermarkets or health food stores and you can buy raw milk. Actually, New Hampshire as well. Then in about 20 states, you have raw milk available just from the farm. And Massachusetts is one of those states. And then about 20 other states, you have raw milk not allowed for sale in any, either from the farm or via retail, except in many of these states now you have alternative arrangements that have sprung up as people have been demanding raw milk. You have what are known as herd shares or cow shares, where people buy a share of the farm or of the herd. Mm-hmm. Massachusetts is one of those 20 states that allows sales of milk, raw milk from the farm. The Massachusetts has an unusual wrinkle, and the wrinkle is that the availability of raw milk is controlled by the towns, even though it is regulated for the most part by the state. The state stepped in 1993 through the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources and began issuing permits to dairies that qualified to sell raw milk. And then the MDAR took on the ongoing task of inspecting and testing the milk at these farms. What you had though at that time in 1993 is because of the problems around raw milk, you had roughly half the towns of Massachusetts that had banned the sale of raw milk. Half the towns roughly allowed the sale of raw milk. One of the towns that allowed the sale of raw milk, still allows the sale of raw milk, is Foxborough. And so you have Foxborough allows the sale of raw milk, but because it didn't exercise its any I guess authority it might have to actually regulate it directly, the regulation of raw milk in Foxborough was left to the states. Now, it didn't become an issue in Foxborough till about 2006, I believe, when Lawton's family farm, the last remaining dairy in not only in Foxborough but in Norfolk County, began transitioning from producing conventional milk, in other words, for milk that was being sold to corporate processors for pasteurization, homogenization, and they transitioned over to selling raw milk directly to consumers. The reason they made this transition is the same reason that many farms around the country have been making this transition, selling raw milk is much more profitable, much more financially effective as a business model for dairies than selling milk conventionally. We have lost nationally something on the order of about 90% of our dairies since 1970. And that's because of consolidation and also because the dairy industry is controlled by just a few companies. And these companies have squeezed farmers. They don't, to maximize their own profits, they don't they cut back on or keep the prices that they pay to local farmers as low as they can, and for the most part, smaller dairies in particular cannot survive financially selling conventional milk. So that was behind the transition that Lawton's made, and they started this transition, I believe, in about 2005, 2006, 2007, and they completed it just a couple of years ago, so that now all the milk that they produce from, I think they have about 20 or 24 cows, goes for sale as raw milk. And that milk is sold direct from the farm. People come to the farm. I've been there. You email or call in advance, tell Ed Lawton or Terry Lawton that you want a gallon or 2 gallons or 3 gallons of milk, and they then have it available for you to pick up, and you pay for the milk, and it's worked well. I think we have now 28 dairies around Massachusetts that are allowed to have permits, like Lawton's does, to sell raw milk. And the system has worked. There hasn't been a reported illness in Massachusetts since 1993 at a permitted farm. So it's been a good system, and that's been the situation really around New England. There really hasn't been much in the way of illnesses. Maine has not had an illness in at least the last 5 years. New Hampshire, in any kind of recent memory. Vermont, similar kind of situation. You have had some illnesses in some other parts of the country, but it's not a big public health problem. Even though public health professionals still really don't like raw milk, and they will, and the FDA, which is the federal public health agency, hates raw milk, and they advise against consuming raw milk. They would like to see raw milk completely done away with. And in fact, they have their own regulation which prohibits interstate shipments of raw milk.
Oh, really? I did not know that. That's
because raw milk remains controlled on a state-by-state basis, they can't really interfere with the local production of raw milk.
Interesting. So with the 1993 action that happened, Massachusetts set in place a regulatory oversight network, and they've got inspectors, and Lawton's Farm.
They've got 2 full-time inspectors.
Okay, great. So Lawton's Farm is a great example of a farm that's making a product that is regulated, is inspected. I had the opportunity to visit with Ed a couple weeks back, and I saw the production, and he definitely has a very mature facility up there. He has a clean room because they also make cheese, and they do pasteurize the cheese. And so it is not a question of the inability or the refusal. This is a choice, and Lawton's Farm made a business decision back in 2005, 2006 to transition into this industry, if you will. And I suppose there's many reasons why we as consumers would want raw milk as opposed to the pasteurized product. But what it comes right down to is it is a safe product, correct?
Well, I feel it's a safe product, and I think my point in this is I don't want to impose this choice of raw milk on anyone. I don't go around advocating you should stop drinking pasteurized milk and you should drink raw milk. I just think people should have the choice. So I personally prefer raw milk. I know a lot of other people that prefer it. But it kind of there's certain other kinds of foods I prefer unprocessed, or I prefer to buy direct from the farm, and I just feel I should have that choice to buy my food that way. And it's unfortunate that we've seen these kinds of conflicts that we saw in Foxborough over raw milk. We've seen these conflicts around the country, where public health, either local public health people or state public health or agriculture people, have decided that we shouldn't be able to necessarily access food directly from the farm without pretty extensive. And what I argue in my book, actually, Life Rights, that we have a long tradition, not only in this country but worldwide, of people buying their food directly from farmers. Before World War II, that was the way most people got their food. I mean, that was just, you went to a farm store, you went to a local merchant who had bought it from the farm, and that was how milk, or not only how food was distributed. And it's only been since really the end of World War II when we saw the creation of supermarkets,
yes.
that things changed. And but the part, I mean, and now I'm getting a little philosophical, but with the advent of supermarkets, really, it's great convenience and great for getting certain foods, quickly to many people, so they could buy fresh produce and fresh other foods. It also really created a distance between people and their food. And people today have much less understanding and recognition of just how their food is produced. And so, just as one example, I mean, I think many people today, when they go to a farm or they see film of a farm or whatever, they're amazed that there's actually dirt and there's manure, and that when chickens or cattle are slaughtered, there's blood, and it's and a lot of people just don't want to know that,
right.
And that's I mean, it's unfortunate, because when you understand how food is produced, then you have more of an appreciation of what people like the Lawtons are doing to make food available.
And to that end, in talking about the supermarket, it's also a great example of essentially the homogenization of our suburban society, if you will. And looking back at the actions of our local Board of Health, I have to believe that's part of it, is that there's a desire to just take out or eliminate certain unpleasant aspects of life. And some of that is the manure smell. Some of that is the realization that sometimes choice does not mean we have total control. And part of that's the beauty of being an American. And I absolutely believe it's a right of an American to have some choice, to accept a certain amount of risk. And of course, in the age of lawyers and whatnot, that risk has always got to be mitigated and understood. And at some point, some of these opportunities for freedom do escape us. Anybody who's flown on an airplane understands that at post 9/11. But getting to farmers, and in this case, milk production, it is a regulated industry. Raw milk, as you point out in your book, and you have another book that you're the author of also. We have the raw milk revolution behind America's emerging battle over food rights. And then the one you mentioned, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Food Rights, the escalating battle over who decides what we eat. And for anybody who would like to follow up after this interview and learn more, you do have a blog that you author and you moderate, and that is, could you tell me the blog?
Yeah, the blog is called thecompletepatient.com, just the way it sounds.
Okay.
We have some pretty active discussions there about, oftentimes about the raw milk regulation issue as it comes up. And I posted a number of articles about the situation in Foxborough. and there was some pretty active discussion. It became a topic of national interest because it was just the latest example of public health people trying to insert themselves in this availability of raw milk. And people ask me, and I still don't fully understand why the Board of Health in Foxborough decided to insert itself into this issue. They said there were a couple of instances where the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources had shut down the Lawton's family farm for a couple of days because they had some high bacterial count readings. This is not a terribly unusual kind of a situation. It happens to a lot of farms at one time or another, and they have the bacterial counts, which are measured routinely, and these are not pathogens. These are bacteria that are used more to measure overall sanitation, and those counts went up, and they do go up from time to time, but they generally, when the farmer is aware that that's happened, they figure out what the problem has been. And I think at Lawton's they thought there might have been a problem with the cooling system at one point. Milk after it comes out of the cow is immediately cooled down, and so there might have been some malfunction there. But there are a number of places where there can be problems, and those are when they with this inspection process and this testing process, the farmers and the inspectors find out pretty quickly if there is any kind of an issue, and it's corrected. Now, the town says that those couple of instances were the reason it got involved, and but they didn't just get involved. They decided they were going to go to the next step and actually take over inspection of Lawton's family farm. They do have that authority. As I said, Massachusetts gives the local towns a fair amount of authority in this milk regulation business, and so they proposed rules whereby they would take over the inspection and the testing and overall regulation of Lawton's.
Well,
I think a lot of people, myself included, just wondered why they would want to do that, and what made them, and not only why, but what qualified them to do that.
Well,
we have two full-time inspectors in Massachusetts who that's all they do, and they know that process and that business better than any of us. And so why would the health inspector in Foxborough, who told me she really had never had been trained or didn't have any experience in inspecting dairy farms, want to take that over? Not only why would she want to do that just to do it, but why would that be seen as a safer way of doing things than the existing system?
Right, and that's exactly what I think a lot of people recognized. And I did not attend the public hearing, but through those who did attend, there's just an overwhelming sense that it was an attempt to assert local authority where A, it wasn't necessary because the state was already regulating it, and B, even if that local authority was asserted, there was a grave concern that we didn't know what we were doing, to put it gently. So the outcome, I think, validated the process, and while it's unpleasant,
it did. But it wasn't it wasn't an open and shut situation, and there were no guarantees that would happen. And I think if there hadn't been 300 people in attendance there, with a dozen or more prepared to testify in favor of keeping the existing system or against the local involvement, I'm not sure they wouldn't have pushed that through. I mean, there was certainly one of the three members of the Board of Health who was committed to this, and then the other two, when they finally spoke out at the meeting, it wasn't clear that one of them might not have gone along with it if there hadn't been 300 people there. But they looked out over that crowd, and that crowd was completely almost entirely supportive of the Lawtons. And I think they said, hey, we're going to bow to the will of the people here. And so they made the decision they made, which I think was the right decision.
Well, and there's nothing wrong to bowing to the will of the people. That's pretty much the keystone of how this country works. And so
it doesn't always work out that way,
yeah.
at least when it comes to food regulation, though.
And
that's part of why I wrote my book. I mean, we have public health people getting involved. I mean, and we've had it in Massachusetts where they've gotten involved in trying to shut down, and they actually have shut down lemonade stands. They're getting into regulatory areas that really have been kind of private, informal kinds of areas, church suppers, as I said, sales of food from the farm to food clubs and so forth. That really, has been out of their purview, and they're inserting themselves into that. We now have regulations in Massachusetts governing bake sales at schools. I mean, it's part of a larger issue that we have, and I think a lot of it has to do with kind of the fear mentality which has sprung up and since 9/11.
Yeah. Well, with the inexorable march of having rights squelched by big government, this is one time when the little man, if you will, won and the power of the people spoke. And the Board of Health saw the light, if you will, and decided to back off their proposed regulations here in Foxborough over raw milk. Mr. Gumpert, we have so much enjoyed this opportunity, and we are so out of time, and I apologize. I'd like to give you the last word. While I get you a second to think about that, I want to tell viewers again that they can check out Mr. Gumpert at www.davidgumpert.com. That's his website, but he also writes a fascinating blog, and apparently Foxborough was all over it. So I would give the shout out to check that out at www.thecompletepatient.com. Mr. Gumpert is the author of 2 books that are available by going to the blog site or at Amazon.com. One is The Raw Milk Revolution, Behind America's Emerging Battle Over Food Rights. And the other is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Food Rights, The Escalating Battle Over Who Decides What We Eat. David, it has been a pleasure having you join us via Skype to our little town here. And I know that you come by every once in a while. You're a customer of the Lawton Farm, and you also put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. Not only do you write about it, but you drink the drink.
Yes,
last word.
And I think I would just alert people. This is an issue that isn't going away. One of the Board of Health members said at the meeting last Monday that this might come up again in Foxborough. It has a way of coming up over and over, and I always try to encourage people to support their local farmer, and the best way to do that is to try as much as you can to buy your food directly from the farm, not necessarily from Lawton's, but go to farmers markets and buy your food locally and support. That has the effect of supporting local farms, and local farms are good. They're good for the local economy, they're good for the environment, and they're good for our health. So that's what I always try to encourage people to do.
That is the best word of advice of all. David Gumpert, thank you so much for joining me. On behalf of all the volunteers of Foxborough Cable Access, I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If you would like to learn more about this program, check us out at www.fcatv.org. Click on the Foxborough Central flag and you'll find this program as well as all of the others. I'd like to give a special thanks to Betty Travers, Deb Storrs, Gary Nash, my wonderful volunteers, and also Mike Everson and Michael Weber, who helped put this Skype opportunity together. David Gumpert has been my guest. You've been my friends. Thank you very much, Foxborough. Have a great day.